Hey everyone, welcome to Pianist Academy. I am Charles Szczepanek. It's great to see you here on another Wednesday live stream. Welcome Rob and Bedlington Groomer and C Drive, Nancy, Bethany. Hello. It's good to see all of you today, and there's a few more people here, so if you haven't said hi in the chat, please say hello if you can. I'm going to actually jump right in today because I got a question via email that we're going to kick things off with, and it's from Antonio, our good friend Antonio, who can't join us live today, but I was going to kick things off with his question, and then Soft TFM, he said, how can you improve your technique of arpeggios? We'll jump into your question next. So you'll be second up, okay? And then, the whole rest of our time together today for about the next 2 hours will just be open to whatever you'd all like to talk about. So, okay, without further ado, the very first question that came in from Antonio, and I think, Bethany, you'll definitely find this helpful, and Rob, you may also find this helpful. It's about recording audio, a little bit about some technical stuff with recording audio. Specifically, Antonio asked about sample rates and bit depth. Let's start off with just a general question for everybody. What is the first form of digital audio that you're familiar with? Type that in the chat if you can. By the way, how this all applies to piano and music and all that is Antonio's using a piano sample library to record himself playing selections. And I know Bethany does the same thing. I know Rob does the same thing. I do a lot of this. And so if you're recording yourself at home, especially if you're using a DAW or a digital audio workstation, piece of software that you can record your audio with, the couple things we're going to talk about today are really important for those tasks. Sergey, I think Sergey, did I say that right? Or Serge? Let me know, please. Hello, welcome. Sam, you're the same Sam that tuned in 2 weeks ago, yes? Are you? Let me know, because I didn't get to answer your question while you were here last time, and I will definitely. You mentioned Clair de Lune. If it's the same Sam, you mentioned. Yes, you said. Sweet. Okay, we'll definitely talk about Clair de Lune also. Sam, think about your first question is it accessible for intermediate pianists? I'll answer that. Yes, it is. It's going to be a bit challenging, but it is accessible. Do you have a really particular question about the piece, or just starting the piece? And we're going to jump into, Sam will jump into details about Clair de Lune to help you out after I talk about this one from Antonio, and then talking with Soft about improving some arpeggios. I haven't gotten any responses from people about the first format of digital recording that you're familiar with. Bethany, you say you know very generally about sampled versus modeled VSTs, okay? How many people know about CDs? And Sam, thanks for checking out the masterclass. I really appreciate that. I think you're going to learn a massive amount from there because the whole class is 2 hours long. And if you started going through it, I really, really hope that you find it very helpful. But we'll dive into some more details together today too. CDs. How many people are familiar with CDs? I'm not. I know many of you have owned CDs, compact discs of your favorite music in the past. CDs are a form of digital recording, right? They were the first commercially available digital medium that you could buy and play at home. And so CDs, so this all relates to Antonio's question. And we're just going to use, Robbie said we have way too many CDs collecting dust. Yeah, I don't really pull them out anymore all that often. But compact discs were invented in 1982, right? Okay, so they've been around for quite a while. The first, so I know this is staff paper, but it's the only blank sheet I have. Okay, so CDs came around in 1982. Digital recording was actually invented before that in 1967 in Japan. So digital recording has been around for a long time. And at first, I just think it's a fun little tidbit of history. It was recorded on tape. It was like videotape that was repurposed to capture a digital audio signal. So digital usually means everything, at least until fairly recently. Digital means that everything is some kind of 1 or 0, right? Digital information is a string of 1s and 0s, etc. Okay, so when we capture or are recording audio, we have a variety of different sample rates we can choose from to make that recording. We're skipping a lot of history just to jump to this point. Antonio's particular question was that he was using this library called the Princeton Steinway D, and it comes in 4 different sample rates and bit depths. 44, so this is kilohertz, 44,116 bits, or 48,000 or 48 kilohertz and 24 bits, or 88,000 hertz, 88 kilohertz and 24 bits, or 96, yeah. Okay. This kilohertz, this is sample rate, by the way. Sample rate is on the left. Think of this as like how many times, by the way, anytime you start up a project that you're recording in Logic or Pro Tools or Reaper or whatever you're using, Cubase, anytime you start up a project, you need to make a choice about what sample rate and what bit depth you're going to use. And there might be an auto default selection, but knowing this can be helpful. So a sample rate is, think of it as how many times your computer is taking a snapshot or a picture of the audio that's coming in, the signal, the electrical signal that's coming in. And at 44,100 or 44.1 kilohertz, that means your computer is capturing or taking a snapshot of your audio 44,100 times every second. Every second. That's a lot of samples. And then they go up from there. We go to 48,000 samples per second, 88,000 samples per second, 96,000 samples per second. So those are all snapshots. You might think that the more snapshots we have, the better we can use this digital information, which is just little points in time, the better we can reconstruct a wave, a sound wave, because a sound wave is curved. It's not jagged. And if we're capturing 44,100 samples in a second, well, we might have a point here that we capture and a point here and a point here. And then a computer has to interpret how those all connect, and it rebuilds a sound wave that we can hear. Interestingly, we're not going to clear all that. Interestingly, this was proven by a guy named Nyquist. What is the maximum frequency that a human ear can hear? Does anybody know that? We were talking about kilohertz, but you know, right? Sound is measured in hertz and kilohertz. Hello, Catherine. Bethany says less than a dog. Yes, less than a dog, less than a bat, more than a rock. Yeah, thanks. Okay, thanks, Bethany and Sam. Depends on your age, Rob. That's also correct. It does depend on your age. The older we get, the more of the high frequencies we lose, that we aren't able to perceive anymore. Good morning, Alan. Okay, let's say a perfect human being. This doesn't quite exist in nature. But a perfect human that hasn't had any ear problems and everything, the brain and the ear and the eardrum, they're all just a picture perfect representation of the equipment we get in our body can hear up to 20,000 hertz. That's a very, 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 very high frequency. To give you an idea, A, that orchestra tunes to, for example, this one that I'm playing right now, that is 440 hertz. Every octave we go up, the frequencies double. So the A above that is 880 hertz. The A above that would be 1760. I think I did that right. And then the A above that would be double that, which I'm not going to do on the fly. But it's still, it's less than 4,000 hertz, right? And we're 2 notes from the end of the piano. So, right, all this 20,000 hertz far exceeds the highest note on the piano. Thank you, C Drive, for doing that math. 3520. Thank you. Okay, so those are A's going from A440, the A above middle C, up octaves. Okay, now even though these are fundamental pitches, this 440 hertz, for example, that note that I'm playing actually contains overtones and a whole lot of extra information. And can everybody still see me, by the way? I just got an error message on YouTube. Let me know. Okay, great. I'll just keep going because I can't see myself, but let me know if I stop showing up. Okay, so every one of these pitches has a lot of overtones, etc., etc. Overtones are tones that create a character, let's say, in a particular sound, and those go exceedingly far above the fundamental pitch. So for us to interpret and hear this as A440, we really need... Okay, great, everybody. We really need all kinds of... We need to use our maximum range of hearing to understand that. It's also has to do with, you could think of this like if when you're talking to somebody on the phone, or you answer the phone, and this doesn't happen so much anymore, but do some of you remember if you had a landline and you'd answer the phone and you wouldn't have caller ID and you wouldn't know who it was, within a very small amount of time, you would know who you were talking to. They would have to say a word. And that is because their voice is built out of all kinds of overtones that are unique to them. And our ears are really great at remembering those patterns and those series. That's why we can recognize notes on a piano as notes on a piano and not notes on another instrument. It's because of the overtones that are far above the fundamental pitch. Okay, we've had a little bit of talk about sample rate. We've had a little bit of talk about what frequencies are in sound waves. Yes, I will go back soft. Absolutely. Thanks, Bedlington Groomer. Okay. So, we jump back to this. There's a reason why all of these options are far above 20,000 hertz, the amount we can hear. And that is because this guy, Nyquist, developed a theory that is, well, we've proven it. Oh, Siri wants to talk to me. Let's not do that. That in order to accurately represent the any pitch, we have to have at least 2 sample points to redraw that frequency or redraw that sound wave. So by oversampling, so if you take 20,000, right, and you multiply it by 2, you get 40,000. So instead of using 40,000 samples per second, where we might not get a great representation of 20,000, he said, well, why don't we go a little bit above 40,000? And came up with 44,100 samples per second. That's an important number, and that's why I brought up CDs in the first place, because CDs that we have listened to for a long time, what is printed on the back of the CD that the laser reads are 44,100 samples per second at 16 bits. That's been known as the consumer delivery. Oh, thanks, Soft. I appreciate it. Okay, so we talked about sample rate, this side. Now we need to talk about bit depth, and this one is a bit easier. I'm not going to go into quite as much detail about it. Bit depth, especially when we're talking to musicians, is like dynamic range. So we know that we can have, when we're talking about piano music, let's say, or any music, right? We have pianissimo to fortissimo, and we might have some more extremes, but okay, we have a wide dynamic range that we can play. And if we were to, say, measure pianissimo playing with a decibel meter, we get about 50 decibels. If you were to measure, and I actually just did this maybe 2 weeks ago with my phone. You could do this too. There are free decibel meters you can buy. You don't have to buy them, just in the App Store. And I had my phone on the music rack, and I played some stuff. I was talking to a few other teachers about a similar thing. Pianissimo playing is here live in the room. That's about 50 decibels. My voice is louder than that. My voice is about 80 decibels. Fortissimo playing, I'm not going to blow your ears off with that right now, but fortissimo playing can exceed 100 decibels. So there's a 50 decibel, maybe more, difference between our softest playing and our loudest playing, right? That's its dynamic range, and we're changing it from the Italian words into decibels, a measurement of sound. On a recording, 16 bits of depth, and I'm kind of showing this vertically. You think of like the highest bits as capturing fortissimo or being available for fortissimo, and the lowest bits as being available for softer stuff. And I believe, I didn't look this up prior to the stream, but I believe that 16 bits of depth, like what's on a CD, provides for a clean representation of about 60 to 70 decibels of dynamic range, which, based on the description I just gave you, if we're playing pianissimo and fortissimo, that's plenty to show that, right? It's plenty to show all of the very, very, very soft stuff and all of the really loud stuff and keep it all intact. That's another reason why CDs are 44.1 at 16 bits. The problem with recording, going back to the question about recording, is that often we can't optimize our sound to accurately use those 16 bits while we're recording. Because if we can reach our peak, the top of our signal level, the maximum sound, if you go over it at all, it sounds really bad on a digital recorder. It's just distorted and clipped and sounds horrible. Really, really bad. But everything up till that point is perfectly clean. So what happens in digital recording is that this ceiling, this maximum, we try not to come very close to it at all. So we say our maximum that we're going to play is going to be down here while we're recording. And then in post-production, we'll figure that out, how much further it's got to go. Sam, well, thanks for joining in. I will definitely get to your question. Okay, thanks, Sam. That is the reason why. So now, okay, if we are down here, well, how far down are we? Have we lost a dynamic? Have we gone from, if this is fortissimo up there, is this forte? Or is it even lower? Is this like what mezzo piano would have been? And now we have to increase that all the way? Well, if we're only recording at 16 bits, we're going to run out of room at the very bottom. So our very soft stuff isn't going to get captured very well. It's going to be fuzzy and muddy and not good. And then as we try to bring that up in volume, we're going to bring up a bunch of not great sounding stuff. And if we go back up to the options that Antonio gave, we have all these other bit depths. 24 is more than twice the dynamic range. It's not double the number of bits, but it is more than twice the dynamic range available during a recording. So Antonio said he was hearing a difference between 44.1 and 16 bits when he was recording with his library. And then when he switched to 48.24, Ellen, I'll come back to that in a second. When he switched to 48.24, he said it sounded clearer and like he had more dynamics to play with. And there's probably a good reason for that. The designers of the sample library had to limit the dynamic range that the samples worked at the low sample rate and the low bit depth in order to keep it all clean. And as soon as you increase that, especially to 24 bits, we get probably all of the original dynamic room back, what was originally recorded. So Antonio had said, like, was my mind playing tricks on me? Did I just see the numbers go up and think I heard it better? Probably not. You probably heard a true difference. So Antonio followed that up with one more question, and then we'll move on. And that was, what do I use when I record? What sample rate and what bit depth do I use? And for a long time, I used, I mostly used 44.1 at 24 bits because it saves some hard drive space, makes projects easier to work with. But for the last few years, I have used 96 at 24 bits instead. And the primary reason I changed, because like we talked about before, like this one and this one, according to the Nyquist theorem, we're actually going to get this exact same representation of sound out of both of those sample rates when they're reconstructed as a sound wave. The primary difference I changed is not because this one sounds better, but it's because it's marketing, if I'm totally honest. How many of you use Apple Music? Apple Music is trying to push more and more high resolution or studio masters to their listeners. And so streaming on Apple Music, if you enable it, you're no longer streaming an MP3 or a really compressed audio signal that is pretty compromised, especially for classical music listening. They want to push, well, here you can listen to the same thing that the engineer in the studio that was recording it was listening to. So I've started recording at 9624 because Apple likes files delivered that way. And so does Tidal if you have streamed things on Tidal. It's another really high resolution streaming platform. Spotify, that a lot of people use, they, I believe, will only accept CD quality. And so it's made things a little more complicated with distribution and all that. If you're into that kind of stuff, Bethany, you might be. Rhodesy, you might be. By the way, Bethany and Rhodesy, for sure, because you post stuff on YouTube, YouTube desires your final delivery to actually be 44.124. They request that, and it'll get the least amount of compression, or the least amount of your audio will be changed if you deliver to YouTube in that sample rate and bit depth, which is also different because video professionals have always worked at 48. So that the fact that YouTube made a different choice is pretty striking. Okay. I think that's going to wrap up working with Antonio's question. Antonio, when you have a chance to check it out, I hope you find that helpful. You did hear a difference. I would always work at 24 bits and never at 16 because when we're recording, we just don't have enough bits at 16 to actually record everything we need to. When we release, we can, because like Alan said, why can't we just put a limiter on all inputs and forget about it? Well, we don't always know, Alan, how loud our playing is actually going to be or how loud our source is going to be when we're recording. And so we do it in post-production, so we have a lot more control of that. But yes, limiting happens. And then we squash the dynamic range a little bit. There are a lot of reasons to do that. So most of the time that you're listening to a classical recording, it probably isn't 50 or 60 decibels of dynamic range. Probably. There might be more of that coming out these days, but especially if you're listening to older recordings, it won't be, because older mediums like LPs couldn't represent all of that massive change in dynamic. Also, a lot of people, I know, C Drive, just wait for the music part. A lot of people listen to audio in less than ideal environments. Like, how many of you listen to music when it's totally quiet? That just doesn't happen for most people. Most of us are listening either while we're doing something else, or you're in a cafe working, or you're in the office, or you're in the car. Thanks, Bethany. And because of that, there's all kinds of extraneous noise that the music is competing with while you're listening. Thanks, Jacob Jr. I'm sorry I missed you, but thanks for joining in. And if you had a question, I'll come back to it, Jacob. Anyway, that's enough about this. Bedlington Grimmer, you say, do they ever use pitch correction on instruments in orchestra? You can't do pitch correction on instruments in an ensemble. So far, thankfully, I'd say, so far it's not possible to... you can't correct pitch on a piano. You can't correct pitch on anything that is a polyphonic source where more than one pitch is happening simultaneously. So whether that is an instrument that's polyphonic or if it's a monophonic instrument, maybe like a violin is most of the time, just playing a single note most of the time, you can't tune that instrument if it's playing with an orchestra. You could tune the whole orchestra up or down, but you can't tune a single person within that. Roadsay, I'll have to check the calendar for that. Let me do that real quick, and then we're going to jump to Soft's question. Roadsay, the 26th of March will be the next stream if you have a piece you'd like to send. Absolutely. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for sticking around through that. I find it fascinating. I think Bethany did too. Soft, you said, how can you improve technique for arpeggios? Great. Okay. Soft, do you have a particular arpeggio that you're working on or a set of them? And are you preparing them at a certain speed? Answer as many questions of those as you can. So, root position, what speed are you practicing? What arpeggio? Are you preparing them for an exam? Or just for fun, just to get better? We'll give Soft a second to answer that. Which gives me a second to sip some coffee after that, all that math. Okay, Soft, you said you just want to be better. Great. What arpeggio are you playing? Which ones are you practicing right now so I can use the same one for you? G major. Okay, great. Okay. Let's approach this today in a similar way that we talked about a couple weeks ago. I was maybe a month, 2 months ago now. I was talking a little bit about Chopin's Opus 10 number 1. Soft. I know we're not there yet, but we're going to approach the arpeggio in the same way you'd have to approach that really advanced etude. So, instead of staying stretched out to play all of the notes of G major like this, right? Don't do that. Let the hand relax and try to play one note at a time, letting the arm shift position. So as I'm playing this, I'm trying to keep the wrist in alignment. I'll move my mic, there we go. So in alignment behind the finger that's being used. So if I'm really stretched out and I play like that, especially when we get to the 5th finger, it's way out of alignment. See, it's stuck way out to the side. And if we only have to play a single note at a time, we don't have to do that. We can keep things, for example, thumb behind or in front of the wrist. The wrist is behind the thumb. 2nd finger the same. 3rd finger is the same. And notice how the wrist has moved from the thumb to the 3rd finger. That's a more noticeable movement. And then when we play the thumb again, instead of doing a massive contortion of the hand where the thumb has to tuck way underneath and 3, 4, and 5 get tense, and we try to finger legato that, the wrist moves, and we can reach. I realize you can't see under my hand as that's happening. But first and foremost, try to maintain this relaxation in the hand. Relaxation in that we're not staying stretched out like that, but behind each note in question. Secondly, and this is one of my favorite, I guess it's two of my favorite ways to work on arpeggios with students, is practice them in opposite ways. So the most common way beginners work on arpeggios, or they're told to work on arpeggios by a teacher or by a method book or anything like that, is to play them with finger legato. And that finger legato approach is what creates a problem sometimes. It can create the problem where as we try to hold the third finger in the right hand and we move to the thumb, for some people, the elbow flies out to try to get the thumb in place, right? Like that. That's not good, but sometimes finger legato promotes that. Finger legato is important, but in order to maintain this kind of more relaxed hand shape and avoid the chicken dance as we play arpeggios, play them detached or non-legato. Because as I do this, now when I get to the third finger in the right hand, I'll show the other view in a second. All I do is move the hand sideways to get to the thumb. So we get to the third finger and we move the hand instead of doing this to try to reach it. And by allowing that detachment to happen, we're saying, oh, it's okay for the wrists to stay in alignment. It's okay that the fingers aren't connecting. Yeah? That's a really, really great way to practice arpeggios and scales. People that have been here in the lives often, you know I talk about playing non-legato or detached. So I said two ways because we want to combine practicing detached arpeggios, up and down, of course, with finger legato. And the idea is that when you play this finger legato, we want to be absolutely sure, be mindful of what the elbow is doing, be mindful of how the thumb is working under the hand, that when we need to shift from 3 to 1, that this isn't going out, right? Like that. But that it's just a kind of a small rotation, lateral movement of the wrist here to help bring the thumb under. And then the hand comes back. And going slow is great. Yep. As you go faster, there's going to be more and more tendency to throw the elbow. It feels like it's going to make it easier for the thumb to get there in time. But truly, while we're going slowly, we want to practice. Oh, I think I can show it this way. We want to practice how far the thumb can reach under the hand to the fifth finger. For all of you here, can you do that? Can you take this is right hand, right? Can you take your right hand thumb and can you put it beneath the bridge knuckle, the big knuckle of the fifth finger? And is that easy to do? Or is it hard to do? Can you go further? I'm kind of getting further, but I'm also bringing the fifth finger in a little bit. If you can't do that, what finger does the thumb get to? Does it get to 4? Does it get to 3? C Drive says yes, pretty easy. Good. Good. That is the movement that it translates at the keyboard when the thumb comes under. Take a look at this. When 3 is playing D in this G major arpeggio, 5 is naturally, without stretching, is naturally very close to the G that the thumb needs to play. So if the thumb tucks under the hand, its maximum amount, there we go, we're almost all the way to that note. If this is difficult, or if this feels tense, this is a muscle that needs working, and it's this big fat one. A lot of pianists, if you look at a lot of pianists' hands, they have a really big developed muscle behind the thumb, because the thumb is always doing this movement around and all over the place. Yeah? So that, we want that to be as easy as possible. And like stretching any other part of the body, the more we do it, the easier that gets. When we come to play the arpeggio, if I just play the note, for example, that my thumb is hovering over, I get F instead of G, which means all I need to do is a tiny bit of movement in the wrist to help bring the thumb all the way to where it needs to go. Okay, that was kind of a complicated, now that I'm thinking back about it, a complicated description of playing arpeggios. But it sums up into those two ways. Non-legato, which I think is primarily in the first way you should really practice them. Non-legato. You could create an intermediary between non-legato and full legato by playing legato and then skip. Skip. And make sure that as you skip, we're not heavy on the thumb, because the risk is that when we skip, we go and we spring off too loud on the third finger, and then we land on the thumb, and we don't want that to happen either. We want to have control over all of that. And then when you go to fully legato, okay. Speed, I don't think, is ever a great goal to have. So if you learn those hand positions and you learn the movement really well, take your time. The same thing, by the way, applies to the left hand. I didn't do any demonstration with it. The left hand, for most of the white key arpeggios, people usually find those easier. And it's because of the distance that the thumb has to move under the hand. In the right hand, it's a much bigger distance. It's a fourth. And in the left hand, it's only a third as you play the same arpeggio. So, great question, Soft. Yeah. And Nancy, great that that was helpful for you also. And hello, Zero. Okay. So I see Sam left, and Sam wanted to talk about Clair de Lune. But he doesn't have any more questions. He didn't give me any more questions other than the very first one. Sam, because we missed you last time, because I missed you last time, we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to do a little bit more in depth about Clair de Lune, and I'm going to try to give you some general pointers. And we'll go from there. Let's see. I need to clear all of... I have a bunch of markings from when I worked on this with the last student of mine. Well, that's good. That's the first couple pages. Okay. I'm not going to put the sheet music up for now, but let me know if you would like to see any of this, and yeah, I'll be happy to show it. Oh, Soft. Oh, great question. Yeah, let me answer that one. So Soft just said, did you have, are there some exercises you can train away from the piano? Let me give you two really quick things that I think are really great, and then we'll jump back into Clair de Lune. One is a finger exercise by Liszt that helps to make sure that we're building a strong bridge. Okay, I don't think of it as muscle development. I think of it more as coordination. It's coordination so that we don't allow certain joints to collapse. And let me see if I can show you this. Probably it's going to be best this way. Okay, so looking at my right hand here, this one, thumb, second finger, bring them together. And then if you pulse, I'm putting little pulses through the two fingertips, almost as if I'm playing with the second finger, but I'm doing it between thumb and second finger. And you can see the pulsing, and you can see how every instant that there is a pulse, there's also a release. I'm not pressing and holding and getting tight. It's just bum, 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 bum. That's with first and second finger. Then do thumb and third finger. You can go through all of the fingers and practice pulsing like this. The most important thing, be sure that second, your last joint right there, the last knuckle, does not collapse like that. Don't pulse like this. We don't want to play the piano like that. And that's the exact thing we're trying to avoid with the exercise. We want to keep, especially that last knuckle, firm. So we're practicing putting force through it and feeling what that's like while not letting it collapse like this. And of course, for all the other fingers, same thing. The second thing is I think some of the best things to do when you don't have a piano around is to do lots of ear training. So listen to the music that you're working on if you can find recordings of it. Even if you're working in method books, there are so many resources out on YouTube of people who have recorded the stuff that's in method books. Listen to some of that. While you're listening to it, can you imagine yourself playing it, the ones that you're working on? And I would spend more time doing that than anything else. So the pulsing exercise and listening to your music, or imagining yourself playing the music that you've practiced already. I really don't recommend doing exercises like on a tabletop. I think they'll end up being more harmful than beneficial. In almost every case, it's going to do more harm than good, because if you imagine that the fall board here is like a table away from the piano, I don't have any feedback about how hard that is. I just know, with my level of training, I know what that's going to translate to. But if you're closer to starting out, even if you're an intermediate player, sometimes even an advanced player, that we don't get any feedback to know what that translates to. We don't have the feedback of knowing, for example, if you want to practice a scale and you're doing it up here on the fall board, well, how do we know if your thumb tuck is the right distance or if it's being lazy? How do we know if your other fingers are the right distance? We don't have any keys to track that. Those are just a couple reasons why I'm not a big fan of physical practice like that away from the instrument. Because if you do any sort of repetition and it is not the same distance as the keys, and it's not using the same force that you want to, among many other things, you're going to be practicing something that is wrong, basically. Something that you don't want to do when you come back to the piano, and then you're going to have to undo that. I actually do have a video. And I can't remember what the title is, but I do have a video because in the last place I lived, we were having our floor redone for about a week. And I had to have the piano moved all over the place, and it was all wrapped up. It was like, wrapped in blankets and all that, as if it was being moved out of the house. And I couldn't access it. I don't have another piano. I don't have another acoustic piano. And I thought, this is a great opportunity to talk about practicing without having a piano. So it's from maybe like 2 years ago. But there is one out there. Okay, let's go back and talk a little bit about Clair de Lune for Sam. So Sam, since it sounds like you're just starting to work on it, one of the really, really important things at the beginning of the piece is to actually make sure you know the counting. You know the time, you know all of the rhythm. And you know that the piece doesn't begin on beat 1. It begins off of beat 1. I think I will show the music. If you just hear Clair de Lune, you think that that the left hand is either beat 1, dum, and then that's the next 8th note. Or you might think that this is a pickup and the right hand is beat 1, like 7, 8, 9, 1. And neither of those are true. And that's really important because I'll put this in red now. Our time signature gives us everything we need to know about where emphasis happens. And Debussy has very purposefully offset the rhythm to be on very, very weak beats. So nothing is on 1. There is no pickup, right? What we do get is on the 2 and the 3. So 1, 2, 3. And if you count 9/8, it's 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3. 1 is the strongest beat. Let's see. I counted 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3 because 9/8 boils down into 3 main beats where the strongest beats are. So that would be 1 in the big beats, 2 and 3, and the beats are a dotted quarter note long. So 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3. That adds up to 9. Those are our 9 beats in 9/8. Debussy has very, very purposely avoided anything on beat 1 or on beat 2. So always at the beginning, feel 1 and where that impetus is, where that pulse is. So you feel 1, 2, 3. Because then the feel of the next 2 notes that you play, left hand, right hand, are so different. It isn't bum, bum, where we land on it. And it's also not 1, 2, 3. It's neither of those. And he was able to show all of that meaning just by offsetting those first 2 notes of the piece by 1/8 note. Kind of genius. Okay, let's see. As you're going through the beginning, be sure you keep counting. As you listen to recordings of this, oh, Sam, you're back. Wonderful, perfect timing. Why is 1 the strongest beat? That's a great question, Sam. In every meter that we have, 1 is always the strongest beat. Think of meter and time signatures. Show us where the natural accent is, or where the natural emphasis is in a piece of music. It's like when we're speaking, right? Every word has a syllable that gets accented. And if you say a word, let's try to think of one that's multiple syllables. Okay, like I'm looking at the Zero's chat from a little bit ago. I will get to your question, Zero, by the way. There was a longer word, compensation. Oh, thanks, Faze. Okay, compensation. 4 syllables. If you put the accent on the wrong syllable, compensation, it doesn't sound quite right. Compensation sounds really wrong. Right? It doesn't sound like the right word anymore. And in music, that's what time signature gives us. It shows where the accent is naturally supposed to be, and composers use that. They're intimately familiar with what time signature they choose, why, and how that impacts the music. So 1 is always very strong, and 1 is called the downbeat. It's always called the downbeat in every time signature, right? But then everything else, we could have a whole class on time signature, but all of the other beats, there's kind of a hierarchy of dynamic importance or pulse importance for all of the other beats in the time signature. A more simple version would be like 6/8 instead of 9/8. If you're in 6/8, 1 is the strongest beat. 1, 2, 3. 4 is the second strongest beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Most of the time. If we're in 4/4, 1 is the strongest beat. 3 is the second strongest beat. 2 and 4 are the weakest beats. Yeah. Bethany, I just saw your comment. Yes, absolutely. So Sam, you said you need to press harder on the note on the first beat. What does that mean? That means that when we feel the pulse going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, that there's just a little bit of emphasis on 1. That also then means that little bit of emphasis is not on the other beats, at least not in the same way. That's what we have to know about the first bar and the bars that are happening subsequently. So if we play that first 2 notes really musically, right, we're omitting the downbeat pulse, or we're feeling it before we start. And then we keep counting. So 1, 2, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2. Well, sticking with the same theme here. That means this phrase, that one leads to, because of how it's written rhythmically, the final note. Because we feel that phrase as ending there, and not being da da da, and not da da da. Okay. So continue to look for all those places, Sam. Let's continue forward. I have to mention this. Pay really close attention as you're learning to where all of the ties are, because they're really important. And often in this piece, they do need to be held with the fingers. Let me clear all this for now. This one, to start us off with. When we get to the end of the first bar, we need to be sure the fingers hold that across the pedal change and into the next left-hand harmony. So we hold, and the pedal can't do it for us because the pedal has to lift for that, right? Same thing happens at the end of second bar. Then we're holding B flat with the thumb into bar 4. Now holding the top C, right? So I'm really looking at all of the ties. Where are they? Here, those ones. We're going to have one there, and this one, and that one, and there's another one coming. Yeah. If we don't observe that tie, that's the one we're on right now. The melody gets choked. It sounds like a little hiccup. Instead of being smooth and lyrical and moving forward, Now check this out, just to kind of bring this full circle for us. And then, Sam, if you've got another very particular question, please drop it in the chat. The second time we get the theme, look at what beat that note is on. It's the same It's the same motif that we had in bar 1. It's in the same register. It's played by the same hands. But this is now on 1, 2, 3, 4. Or it's leading us into the second strong beat. Whereas, right, 1, 2, 3, 4. Go back to the first bar. 1, 2, 3. They happen in different places in the measure. Which also means when we get to this richer voicing of the same motif, we do feel more push musically toward 4, beat 4. Yes. Yeah, Bethany, I think you're absolutely right. So yeah, Sam, since it seems like you're at the beginning of learning this, be sure that you really, really know the rhythm, right? Absolutely how it's written. When you listen to recordings of the piece, mine included, the rubato is so plentiful that it can be hard to identify on the outside. It can be hard to identify where that pulse is. But everyone who plays this piece well absolutely knows where the pulse is and where the strong beats are, because it influences how we draw those phrases together and how we create the music. So be sure you know those rhythms right from the beginning. That would be an easy thing to, like, as you're navigating the notes and where the hands go, it can get dropped off. And we don't work on it as much. It's really, really important in this piece. And it sets the stage so much for everything that's gonna come later. Faze says, just a 9/8 piece alone is crazy to start. Yes. It's a little crazy. Yeah. Sam, do you have any other questions? Or is that a good amount for you to work on for now? Always happy to continue talking about it, especially as you're learning and in future streams. And of course, Sam, if you ever want to send in a recording of yourself playing it, even if it's not done, if you want to send in the first page or the first 2 pages, please go ahead and send some in and we can work on it together. My pleasure, Sam. Thanks. I'm glad we got to talk about it this week. Bedlington Groomer, you say, is Clair de Lune one of those pieces beginners might think is easy because there's not that many notes? Well, there are quite a few notes later on in the piece. If we move forward, these still aren't too difficult to play technically. But the un poco mosso, that's at the bottom of the page. Such lovely music. But yeah, that is pretty obviously not beginner anymore. Between the speed and just how many notes there are. So I think maybe some beginners would want to learn the very, very opening and think that that's easy. And technically it is to play, to execute them. There's nothing that's difficult in the hands. The difficulty... We were talking about this the other day, Bedlington Groomer. The difficulty is like the difficulty in playing the Moonlight Sonata. It's not technical, but it's the intention of every single one of these notes. I'm going to play a wrong note here. Playing, it's a single note melody, and playing it with let's just say playing it with any feeling and emotion is pretty far beyond what most beginners are capable of, because you only get one note and you have to say so much with one note. Okay. Yeah, Faze, I would agree with that. Octave feel, bells. Oh, hey, Nathaniel, thanks for joining. Yes, We changed time in the States last week. Yeah, we did. I almost had that. Yeah, I almost had that mess up one of my private students that didn't change time. Nathaniel, remind everybody. Can you remind me where are you tuning in from? And let's see. Pretty sure the next question that came in was from Sergey. Hopefully, Sergey, are you still here? Oh, great. Nathaniel. Lovely. Belgium. Hello. Nathaniel, are you a beer drinker? Just wondering. I love Belgian beer, so, but I've never been. Sergey says your teacher wants you to play. Let's see. Exercise only the high notes of a piece in the left, and the other notes in the right. Basically, splitting the right hand parts on both hands. Yeah, Lucas, I had the same idea. Sergey, if you're still here, there might be reasons to do that, but it really might depend on the piece, and I could have a stronger opinion about that if I knew what you were working on. Yeah. So anyway, Sergey, if you're still here, drop that in the chat. Hello, Kale. Off the top of my head, if we're talking about only working on some of the notes in a measure particular, the reason for that might simply be that we need to focus on, there might be counter melodies happening or something that's really important in an inner voice, and we need to focus on it. And if the left hand, for example, is jumping around, or if it has an octave and then maybe, right, the jump itself might be a technical thing that's causing us to misphrase or incorrectly phrase. I'm just making something up that's a little different. Yeah? But that might cause that problem. It might cause us kind of a splat in the left hand. It might cause us to be too much thinking about when we need to make the next jump. And we lose focus on the notes that are in the middle, when those maybe they need more care taken with them. That could be one reason. And if it's the upper part of the left hand and maybe the lower part of the right hand working together, it could be because there is one voice or one texture that the upper part of the left hand and the lower part of the right hand are sharing. And so they need to be played cohesively, singing as one instead of as two, even though we have to execute it with two different hands. That would be some of the reasons I can think of off the top of my head about only working that kind of aspect in a piece of music. So there can be reasons for it, yes. Okay. Let's see. Zero, you had a question. I think yours is the next one. Oh, such a good question, Zero. Zero said, when you sight read, do you see patterns? Or do you read notes in intervals? Or a combination of both of them? Yes, yes, yes. Let's pick something that's... not too crazy. but crazy enough. Oh, I have an idea. I'm pulling up some Beethoven to take a look at for all of us together. Okay, let's look at this. Some Beethoven, Opus 49, number 2, in G major. This might be a first Beethoven sonata for a lot of people. I have played it, but I haven't looked at the music in probably a year or more. So it's basically going to be sight reading. Okay, yeah, Zero, you say, although you're practicing sight reading, but you're really bad at it compared to your technical skills. Sight reading, as we get better and better, or as we try to become better and better sight readers, we need to, yes, do what you said, see more and more patterns and understand more and more chord shapes, more and more harmony, but in a practical way. So I'm going to sight read, I'll sight read what's on the page right now, just the first 4 lines. And I'll try to do it at tempo even, and we'll see what happens. And then I'll talk you through the process of what I see as we go. Probably ends on D on the next line. Yep. Okay. So as I'm looking through that, I am dividing things up in a way that makes a lot of harmonic sense and sense for my hand. Let's divide the first measure into just 2 parts. Okay, it's G. It's G major. I see that instantly that it's G major. But I've done a lot of sight reading. So I'm super familiar with the chords and how they're written and multiple voicings of all of them. So Zero, as you want to get better at this, try to analyze the chords that you see all the time. Can you analyze them? It doesn't have to be Roman numerals even. You don't have to do a harmonic analysis, but can we find the root? Can we find what chord it is? How quickly can we find it and start building this vocabulary so that we know, like when you see this is G major. And I read that entire chord on beat 1 as just one thing with an octave in the left hand. I know it's like an instinct. I know what it is because I've seen it so many times. My hands have defined it. Notice I said hands have defined it. My hands know what it feels like to play it. But they've made that connection from doing lots of sight reading and making sure that we understand what does an octave feel like. When you see an octave and you recognize an octave, it's not just an octave, but it has a particular feel in the hand. So do we feel that? And then in the right hand here, first beat, this is an inversion of G major. I couldn't, without some thought, I couldn't tell you what inversion the right hand only is. The whole bar, of course, is in root position. The right hand is in first inversion. I didn't think about that, though, while I was sight reading. I saw the shape of the chord, and I thought, it's this hand position. That's it. That's it. Okay, so I'm pairing what I see on the page with memory of playing these types of chords and things in this relationship before. But we can start doing that with a little bit of extra definition. Next beat. Next two beats. Yeah. What is that? It's also G major. At least up to there, it's G major, arpeggiated. And then I'm reading some intervals to get out of it, a third and a step. But that first bar is just G, G, step, third step. That's how I can sight read it. Here, reading stepwise or linear scalar. This goes back and forth. So seeing that's a pattern, right? Next bar, reading by interval. Yep, those two, and these are in steps. And while I'm reading by interval, I can also, the rhythm is simple enough for me that I can figure it out on the fly. But that's another thing. I think rhythm is a bit easier to learn how to read, sight read, because we can just do a lot of rhythmic practice, and we can do rhythmic practice anywhere. It doesn't even have to be at the piano. It can just be tapping. It can be saying rhythms out loud. And gosh, you could find so many examples to practice reading rhythm. And when pitch is isolated from it, we can build that skill quite fast. You say, Nathaniel, you're using different sight reading books, and some of them don't have fingerings. Yeah. Are you supposed to see good fingerings while sight reading? Oh, great question. And the answer to that is, until you're a concert pianist, no. I think that would be highly unlikely that you would also see good fingerings to use. And even if you have reached an extremely proficient, an extreme level of proficiency, there are going to be places, depending on how difficult the selection is, where it's going to take multiple playthroughs while you really focus on what is the best fingering choice for a passage. So that is another thing that's, gosh, fingering is so hard to teach, and it's a lot of it comes down to how much experience you have. Being able to make the choices on your own and not rely on a teacher comes down to how much experience you have in understanding why your teacher picked the fingerings they did. So hopefully they explain them to you and don't just leave you hanging. So like, why did we cross to the thumb here? Why are we releasing and moving the hand instead of using a legato fingering in another place? And, why are we making this measure more difficult? Well, it's probably to set up more ease in the next bar, which is actually the harder bar to execute. So there's a lot of that stuff. And zero, I can't remember if you're teaching yourself or if you are working with a teacher at all. But if you are and they give you fingerings, ask them why if they don't tell you. And for everybody that has a teacher, if they give you fingerings, ask them why. Why is it important that we play it that way? Like the edition I'm playing off right now, it does not have any fingering choices. I did come up with them on the fly. They weren't all the best, but I'd give myself like a 90 or 95%. Yes, one of a private student of mine that recently started with me, he told me in his first lesson, part of the reason he switched teachers was because all of his previous teachers, they would tell him to go home and figure out the fingerings on his own. Well, like, that's one of the most important parts in having a lesson, is the fingering is so hard to figure out. Oh, gosh. I was in my bachelor's degree before my teacher expected me to have a chance at figuring it out on my own. And even in cases like that, I'd come into a lesson and say, oh, I tried these 3 or 4 things and none of them feel all that great. Do you have another suggestion? and they'd work through it a little bit, and then they'd pull out like 2 copies of the piece off their bookshelf and say, well, here's what I did with my teacher on this passage. Or, here is one editor's perspective, and here's another one, and let's see what they say. And I mean, I had to be careful when I'd ask that question, because that one question about probably one measure would turn into a 30 or 45-minute discussion, which was fantastic, but then we wouldn't get to doing a whole lot of playing that lesson. Yeah. There are lots of reasons for the fingerings we choose. Gosh, and they're so context dependent. I can't even... The only general rule that I give out, really, is that good fingerings help retract the hand. That is it. And it's not 100% true. It's maybe most of the time true. Bad fingerings rely on certain fingers to be stuck out. Really good fingerings don't. Really good fingerings might mean the hand is really pulled in close together like this. Even though it might feel easier to use 1, 2, and 3, the better fingering might be something that feels awkward the first time you do it, but it needs to be learned, because just like we're talking about with sight reading, doing certain finger combinations, for example, like playing 5, 4, 5 in Chopin, or any sort of melodic thing, being able to crawl with 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, somewhat like, I've never played the second etude, right? Oh gosh. Being able to crawl with 5 and 4 around, that's really important. And we're going to use that all the time. But if you've never if you've never performed with fingers in that order, right, that's going to feel awkward. And you're going to say, why? Maybe I'll just move to a different finger. And we're missing out on an opportunity to develop that skill. And Zero, you said you never had problems with fingers until you started Chopin and Bach. And I'd say Bach especially very difficult. Sometimes very difficult to know which ones to choose. Yeah. Nathaniel, so you said, while you're scanning through it, should you write in some fingerings? No, I wouldn't do that. Not while you're sight reading. Don't write fingerings in. You have enough to think about. Just getting the notes and the rhythms right in a sight reading example. That's more than enough. Then good fingerings will come later. So Zero, you said harmony in a practical way in practicing rhythm. Yeah, that does kind of sum it up. Let me give you a few more examples, because we're still talking about seeing patterns. And seeing patterns not just on the page, but understanding when you see them, how they feel to play them is really important. If we look at the second line, first measure in the left hand, when I see that, I instantly see 3 of the same pitches, and my brain says, you don't have to think about that anymore. They're going to be played by the thumb, probably. And then I see a descending stepwise line. And that continues into the next bar. The top notes are all the same. So those get kind of blanked out, blocked out. I play them, but there is no focus given to that. The focus is instead on reading. Well, now, because I know the harmony, this is the third of the chord to the root. And then we're changed harmony to G. That's the root to the 7th. And if I'm just reading a single line, or if I'm thinking about this without all the interspersed D eighth notes, it's just next bar. That's not very hard. Quite a few students would be able to sight read that if they just got rid of the extraneous noise. The part of the pattern that we see that's maybe distracting, we'll still execute it. But it takes next to no thought to say, oh, every other note I'm going to play D. That's pretty easy. David, that's a great question. How important is tempo when sight reading? That depends on your purpose, David. If you're trying to sight read, if you're practicing sight reading, and an example that you're working on is appropriate to the level you are to sight read, then tempo is extremely important. We should be saying something. Let's think about it a different way. Something that you can sight read fully. You should be able to play the prescribed tempo. You should be able to play the notes and the rhythms correctly. You should be able to add dynamics in, and you should be able to show the phrase, at least most of it. You should be able to do all of that upon the first reading if it's something that is truly sight readable for you. As soon as we're missing some of that stuff, then our sight, the level of the piece we're trying to read is perhaps a little bit beyond us, because we're gonna need practice time to start to add in those other components. So yes, tempo is important. It also depends on the situation you're in too. So if you're working as a collaborative pianist, you have to. You don't have a choice. And tempo is, in fact, even more important than playing all of the notes. And so notes and some of the rhythms will go to the wayside if you need to, because you can't process all of it. That would be put slightly aside in order to make sure that as you're working collaboratively with someone else, you are not manipulating in an unmusical way the tempo and throwing them off. So that happened to me when I was in my both my degree programs, doing lots of sight reading at other students' lessons, not piano lessons, other instrumental lessons or vocal lessons. And often I would just be given the piece when I'd walk in the door, and we would have not rehearsed it before, because they're just in the beginning of learning it, and they say, okay, well, we have an opportunity to work the first page with the piano part. Great. Well, that's really valuable. Well, it would be sight reading for me, something that they have been practicing for a month, maybe. And I'd, no matter what, keep the tempo. And also, I've done a huge amount of choral accompanying work. And it's the same thing applies. No matter what, keep with the director. No matter what, in rehearsal. Yeah. Gel Zorro. Hello, Gel Zorro. You say, will the next live stream be about anything forte? Well, it can be. If you have any questions about forte or any repertoire that you want to work on together. No, Bethany agrees about tempo in sight reading with accompanying voice and instrumental students. Yeah. Let's see here. Seth, you had said rhythm seems much harder to learn to sight read, and you're better at the opposite. That's interesting. Sight reading rhythm depends on and I think we've talked about this, Seth. It depends on us having that great sense of pulse within us and not needing to rely on a metronome for it, or anything external. So just knowing when we set a pulse that we can continue no matter what. And we know how all of our, not all, but maybe our most common rhythms fit into that pulse. And we know that instantly and instinctively, right? One of the ways that we practice that at the piano, not even a part of sight reading, one of the ways I love prescribing is doing scales and accelerations, which we've talked about on streams before. But the whole purpose is to set one pulse, play eighths, right? Play triplets, play sixteenths. Because every time we make one of those rhythmic transitions, we're getting that practice of keeping the pulse and making that switch. And that continues to reinforce. Yeah. Gel Zora, you say, choral accompanying is quite something with all those breathing pauses. Speaking of that, it can be so great as pianists. It can be so musically inspiring and changing for us to work with another instrument, especially if we can work with a singer or a choir, anything that's vocal or anything that requires air, right? Any wind player, any brass player, all of those, because music revolves, the humanity in music, I think, revolves around the sense of breath. And we're at an instrument when we play the piano that doesn't require it to operate. It doesn't need air. But if you work with a vocalist, they absolutely have to breathe. They have to find time to breathe. And a good composition for voice is going to give it to them in the right places, but it's still not going to be metronomic. And learning where a vocalist breathes and why, and the amount of time it takes to breathe, it can influence your playing so incredibly much. And make our playing at the piano sound much more, not just musical, but more human. And that's something that I love teaching. And I regularly scare my private students when I say, we're going to sing that line, and they look at me with fright in their eyes, like, I've never sung for anybody. Why am I going to start now? But we'll even do some singing together, because even if you haven't experienced that elsewhere, we can start to experience it just ourselves. We all need to breathe, and we can all make some sort of sound come out of our mouth. How great it sounds, if it's on pitch, that doesn't matter all that much. But we want to feel what it's like to have plenty of air at the beginning of a phrase and really need to breathe when you get to the end. And how long does it take you to refuel? That's important. And it totally changes how you interpret phrase in instrumental music. Oh, goodness. 0? That's a tips for Bach's Goldberg variations, number 5. A 0, I'd love to hear you play it. Oh, gosh. I don't know if I can give you any fingering tips without seeing spots you're struggling with first. And memorizing it. Oh, gosh. Bach is difficult to memorize, I think. See if you can find where various themes, where they stop? Can you find endings, or can you find where motifs happen and where they're recreated in different parts? I have never played the Goldberg variations. I don't have them on my iPad. I don't even have a paper copy of them. But speaking about Bach in general, we still need to find the ends of phrases, and we need to give importance to a certain part, a certain voice part, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, right? If that's in existence, and whichever part is in existence in our score. And can we find endings? Because we need to be able to mentally still kind of block things out in Bach. And Bach has a tendency to be music that just, it feels like it keeps spinning forward and forward and forward, and there's always development. And if we only play it from that perspective, it feels overwhelming. And we also end up relying on muscle memory only to carry us from one measure to the next measure to the next measure to the next measure. And then what happens when there's a little thing that goes wrong? The whole train is derailed. And that is because we don't have maybe a little bit of deeper understanding about motif and phrase, and we haven't practiced starting in the middle of things. We haven't practiced starting in the middle of development segments. So I would look for those and figure out, how can we break this up every couple measures? How can we break it up and have a starting point and a stopping point? It's probably not going to be at the beginning of a bar, almost ever. It's going to be in the middle of a beat. It's going to be in the middle of a bar, and it's going to be revolving around one of the voices, not all of them. But let one voice be in charge of showing, okay, here we're starting something new. Yeah. Zero, why don't you send, if you send in a recording, that will also inspire me to need to learn at least the variation that you're working on. And we can talk about it in a lot more depth, so I would encourage you to do that. Oh gosh, Zero, you said everything revolves around muscle memory for you. We want to change that. It's good to a degree. It's good to a degree. And it is a strong, and it's a very important pillar for us, but it can't be the only one. Let's see, just going back through, Bunny, hello, Bunny Hollow. Oh, and Nancy, I see that you said you've been working on Schumann's First Loss. Nancy, let me know, do you want to work a little bit more in depth on that? We probably could. Bunny Hollow, you said you can sight read fluently, but not the timing because you never got those lessons. So you listen to recordings of what you're trying to learn to help. Yeah, that does help, for sure. Yeah. If rhythm is really a problem, Bunny Hollow and I think it was it Zero or Nathaniel that said that. That rhythm, or Seth perhaps. Find some, or you could even, if there are pieces of music you're working on, just don't look at the pitch anymore, or read rhythm away from the piano where you cannot get distracted by pitch. Better yet, find some examples to read that are just a rhythm, a line of music on just one line. That's just rhythm. You can probably find a massive amount of that stuff online. Another thing to do that would be really important would be find a sight singing book. Not a sight reading book for piano, but a sight singing book. And that will have the whole thing will be full of single line excerpts, which is great because it's going to really help us to focus on seeing pitch, interval relationships, seeing patterns, but doing it one part at a time. Also, it'll help you practice singing and figuring out where breath is. And because they're all in a single line, you could use them as specific rhythmic exercises if you didn't also want to work on pitch. And of course, you could take any of them and play them at the piano too. But that would probably be the last way I would use excerpts in a sight singing book. Zero, my email is in the description down below. There's, yeah, you can check that out. Let's see, Bethany, you said when the instrumentalist or the choir is good, you enjoy collaborative playing more than solo playing. Yes, connecting on a musical level in real time with other people together is a whole different experience. Yeah, it really is. I have really enjoyed the collaborative work that I've done. Yeah, and also it isn't nearly as just anxiety or stress inducing to be out on stage when you're sharing the moment with one other, even just one other person, and you're creating something together. Yeah, it's just wonderful. Even if it's difficult repertoire, it's still lovely. Oh, Nathaniel, that's great to hear that that you're using different types of books and they all kind of emphasize something different. And the Paul Harris book does have rhythm only exercises. Wonderful. I'm not sure how advanced Paul Harris gets. I think I've seen a couple of his beginner ones. But yeah, those seem to be nicely put together. Yeah. Calais, you said you have a hard time keeping rhythm, so you're using the metronome. Great. Do you have any other advice on improving internal rhythm? Sure. Any of our music, Calais, and anybody too, any of our music that we can, that's a pace that's like andante. What does andante mean? Anybody can answer that. Face. It isn't that slow face. Bethany, thank you. A walking speed. Andante, yes, is a walking pace. And andante can kind of move between a stroll and a quick walking pace. And Nancy, yeah, that's lento phase. Or slower than lento. Andante. So if we have a piece that's andante, we can sing it. Notice, like, I'm now coming back to this topic now that we started on it. Leave the piano and get up and walk the pace that your metronome gives you. I wish I can't do it on camera to demonstrate this, but walk the pace and then sing the melody while you're walking. So now we aren't counting 1 and 2 and etc. We're not subdividing 1 and a 2 and, but we are feeling the pulse because we're also taking movement that follows the pulse. Walking is a great one. Yeah. And if you can, if it's a little faster, maybe in short bursts, we can also use a body movement that helps us to feel the pulse while we can concentrate on singing and audiating what the music is. So audiation is that understanding internally that of what we're going to play. It's pitch, it's timing, right? And it's hearing it in our mind's ear. Yeah, I'm thinking about ways that this could be taken way too far. And maybe I'll mention one in a second. But we can start to develop audiation by doing these exercises, which also in turn help to promote a good sense of pulse. Kali, you said your teacher's having you tap on the desk. And maybe you found that reading a book for pianists for rhythm. That's good. It's also good because it's a physical movement that we're employing, and we're not trying to only hear it. The secondary way, let's say we have reached a point where we can play andante, or we can feel that pulse, and it's pretty good. Think about the word that I often use to describe tempo, and it's pulse. I've said that a whole bunch in the last handful of minutes. We were talking about pulse when we were talking about Clair de Lune. That I choose that word on purpose because we also have a pulse. We have a heart rate, and that changes depending on the emotional state we're in, and depending on how we feel. And so if we're feeling tired or sleepy, or we are asleep, our pulse is very low. We might not be able to perceive our pulse when we sleep, but we know what it feels like to be tired, right? We also know what it feels like to be, and maybe that is more like lento, by the way. We also know what it feels like to be excited, which might be, or to be working out, or something else, which might be more like moderato to allegro. And if we think about the emotional connection then to the tempo and to how we feel when we're doing something that's that active or that inactive, that can help us take the next step, which is then applying, not just feeling the pulse, but now we have another internal sense that helps us understand something deeper about what's happening with the music. Gosh, even if we go back to the Beethoven example, this is fast, but not too fast. Allegro ma non troppo. And it's counted, it's in cut time, so we're counting the half notes. Dun, dun. Okay. That feels like something exciting. I get this picture in my mind like we're packing up a carriage and we're going on a road trip. Of course, in the 19th century, not present day. So very period based. And there's just suitcases flying and it's a clear day and we're really excited and we're going to leave the city and go out into the country. And I don't know, that maybe it's the whole family and we're all going to spend the weekend together doing fun things. Okay. That feeling and that excitement leads me to play this just instinctively differently. Than just playing Allegro. Right. That's boring, but yeah. Okay. Oh, Seth, awesome. You're working on Opus 49, number 1. Great. Very cool. Love to hear you play it sometime, Seth. Noteworthy question on Chopin Waltz number 10. Okay. You say you have you have the notes, the rhythms, the feel, but you keep making simple mistakes. It's frustrating. Yes, noteworthy in Bunny Hollow. Thanks. Okay, and Melody, I'll come back to your question in just a sec. Simple mistakes, noteworthy. Simple mistakes happen because if it's something that we've practiced a lot, they probably happen because of a lack of focus. And we're not being really fully present with what we're doing. From one note to the next note to the next note to the next note. Now, if they happen in the same place every repetition, that might be a different problem. That might be a technical problem or how we've practiced it problem. For example, if there's a passage you come across and you're always playing, you get to bar 12 and you always make a mistake and then you fix it and then you go on. What you've practiced is making a mistake and fixing it, not playing it right the first time. That is something that we would need to change. And so the symptom of that problem is when it's the same mistake in the same place and it always takes the same amount of time to fix it. That's a problem in practice. That one it's not easy to fix, but it's easier than the issue with focus. Focus is being so enveloped and engrossed in the music that we're playing that there is not a thought outside of how one note connects to the next note in either hand or both hands. So everything we're always hearing, and while we're playing, we're doing this audiation that I mentioned a little bit ago. So we are also imagining that while we're playing, we know what's coming up next, and we know what's coming up next. And it's not a leap of an octave. It's not this bar I'm dreading, that one's the one that's coming up. It's not that. It's not a technical thing. It's not an interval definition. No, by the time we've learned something, we just know how the piece sounds, how it goes, and what's coming up after that. Zero, you need to drop it in Google Drive or Dropbox for me and send me a link. Yeah, and if you can do that, then I can access your video for next time. Oh, and Bethany, you said the same thing. Thank you. So noteworthy, it's always random. Yeah, so that would be a focus thing. And if it lapses just a little bit, and we talked a little bit about how we can practice staying focused last time, and it's we were talking about it with June's question 2 weeks ago, and it's using interleaved practice. And interleaved practice says if we're making random mistakes, well, let's practice 2 bars, but we're going to jump all over the whole piece so that we know every phrase so well. And we follow that phrase through from its beginning to end, even though it's a short bit. We follow it through and then jump to something totally unrelated, come back to the piece later and do a lot of interleaved practice where we're jumping and jumping and jumping and jumping around. That helps us keep focused through all of those bars, because every time we start a segment, it feels like the beginning of something, and we always have the most focus at the beginning of something. And we need to learn how to build, maintaining that throughout the duration of a piece. Cool. Melody, your question was, when you accompany singers, are you ever asked to change keys on the spot, and how difficult is that for you? Yeah, no, phase melody probably means a significant change. Like, for example, well, I wonder if I even have some on here. I don't. Oh, that's in. Maybe I do somewhere else. No, I don't really. If it was a melody, if it was what Phase said, like changing by a step, that wouldn't be too hard. I could probably do that. If it was changing by like a fourth or a fifth, really depends on how thick the texture is for the piano. Some things I could probably do, and I could simplify the part enough that I could get through it and provide the bed upon which the vocalist can still perform. But as far as getting every single note right, like as if I'm sight reading it and changing the key at the same time, I cannot do that. That would be a fun skill to have, but I can't do that. And if somebody wanted a different key, I would probably tell them, hey, send it to me. Or today, like if you've got your phone, can you download a copy in the key that you want and just send it to me? I'll pull it up on my iPad. I'll be able to sight read that printed in the correct key far better than I'm going to be able to sight read something in G and then, like, without knowing the piece at all, also transpose it to B major or something like that. So, yeah, cool question. If it's easy enough, yes, but otherwise, no. And Catherine, I'm just looking back through the chat. Catherine said, oh, walking. We were talking about Andante. Yeah. Beautiful. Hey, I don't think I missed anybody's questions. Do we have one more to finish the day out, or are we feeling good about everything? Faze, you said Frank Tedesco. He talks about doing songs in different keys. Yeah. For ear training, especially, sure. And yeah, if we're talking about jazz, that'll happen all the time. Where, yeah, a lot of jazz players can, and they really, really learn how to read like all of the standards. They might have one lead sheet, but they can play them in most keys. Maybe not any key, but they'll have like 3 or 4 that are at least within that'll be the most common ones. Because you say not like jazz, but pop. Yeah. If it's simple chord progressions like that sure. Like I can transpose stuff like that. Absolutely no problem. But if we're talking about like a like a Puccini aria or something, where I've got the whole orchestral reduction to play, and it's harmonically complex. I want to have the sheet music in the key that the singer is going to sing it in. There are some collaborative pianists that can do that can change the keys on the spot. And I don't know if that amounts to a skill for them, or if they've done so much collaborative work with those pieces that they have them practiced really well in the common keys that people ask for. And so they just say, I've done that. I've done that 20 times in that key. It's not like they're transposing it on the spot then. Oh my goodness, noteworthy. That's so cool. Oh, wow. Well, I hope you have a great time and really enjoy listening to Simone play at your house. That's awesome. Oh, sweet. Yeah. Bedlington Groomer, you said, can you explain, I think this will be our last question for the day too. Can you explain the importance of starting practice in the middle of a piece and at random times for better practice? Yes. And Bethany, you said, I've just recorded Kronos that we worked on last time. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Please put a link in your description. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Bedlington Groomer, talk about practicing from the middle of a piece and at random times for better practice. So first of all, doing this type of interleaved practice, you can't do it until you know something relatively well. Let's do this. And maybe this will also help with the a little bit parallel to the question that we had about Bach and the Goldberg variations. Here's the Sinfonia number 8 that I put up a little short of myself playing this about a month ago. And I'll leave it pretty zoomed in. Okay. So this is something that I know. I'm not learning it, right? I'm not sight reading it. I'm not early in the process. I can sit down and play it. Right. So first of all, let's make some chunks or make some sections and understand where those might happen. Of course, we have one from the beginning. The next, probably most logical chunk I would start would be focusing on the soprano voice there. We might put some more in there, but let's just use these two for right now just to demonstrate the point we're trying to make. Zero, yeah, absolutely. We will talk about, you know what, Zero, if you have time to send the whole thing before the next stream, because I can't download it right now anyway. So if you've got time to work on more of it, you want to send an updated recording, please do, now that you know how to do that. Okay, so we've got these two chunks, and we're going to say I'm going to practice them in an interleaved sense, because I already know both of them. Let's go and start from the second one. And I'm going to be focusing on hearing the soprano and alto and how the interplay between those. And then incorporating the tenor or bass line. Okay, every time I start, I'm focusing on, is it the soprano? Is it the bass? Do I want to bring out the alto line? Am I just trying to feel where this section begins and work on that? And then as I've practiced this is turning a little bit too much into block practice. So I need to go back to the beginning. Maybe I'll just do that much. Now, the next question would be, can I go back and forth without looking at the score? I don't know if I can do that. I have not practiced that. So can I start in the second example? And just so that I cannot cheat, I've turned my screen off. So I know the second example starts with the soprano and the alto. I'm using some clues I've built. There it is. Can I go back to number 1? Can I go to number 2? So I'm testing myself. Can I switch back and forth between these two? Back to number 1. And here's number 2. So I know right where it comes in the middle of the bar because I've now practiced, and I can start at number 2. That's interesting, especially to me, because I did not practice that piece, this Sinfonia, to play from memory. I haven't worked on it that way, and I haven't worked on it to prepare for a performance or anything more stressful. Yeah? And so if I had tried to do that exact thing without those first couple steps that I showed, if I had tried to start at number 2, I wouldn't have been able to. Not even 5 minutes ago. I wouldn't have been able to go. I would have had to play it from the beginning. Yeah? So in that short amount of time, just a couple minutes, and going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Now I know that spot, and I know how it links, and I can start in either one, and I would continue building that out. The other way to use interleaved practice. So this is great for, right, you said, why is it important to start in the middle of the piece? We're really solidifying how well we know each of the measures, each of the points that we begin with. Let me draw one more conclusion from this that's a little different than where I expected it to go. And we'll probably finish with that. For all of us, when we're looking at a score, you should be able to start from just about any measure. Doing that from memory is really, really difficult. But if you have the score in front of you, as a teacher, I should be able to point and say, start here, right? And there are so many times in lessons that is by far the most effective way to get to the point that we need to work on, or that we need to experience together in a lesson, or we need to practice. And to use this Bach as an example, if I needed to work on the voicing of soprano and alto here, and I had to start back at the beginning of the piece to get there, my goodness, I'm 2 bars in, now I'm 3, and here it comes. I am not going to remember. Okay, maybe I can, because I've played music my whole life and I'm very experienced. Most students are not going to remember 4 bars later, not even 2 bars later. You're not going to remember what you're supposed to be focused on and what you're supposed to be practicing in this particular repetition. We can't have to go back to, for the sake of muscle memory leading us into the phrase, we can't have to go back to some big starting point, like the beginning or like the halfway through the piece, 24 measures in, where maybe it changes a lot, right? And you've practiced starting there, but let's say you could start at measure 24, but we need to work on measure 36. We can't start at 24 and expect to make any progress at 36. We need to be able to start in 35 or 36 or 34. All of those spots. And as long as you do have the music in front of you, we should be able to do that. If you can't do that, you probably are relying too much on muscle memory carrying you from measure to measure to measure to measure. And then when you try and start in the middle of a phrase, you have no idea. And it's like, and this happens too often, it's like you've never seen it before. and you have practiced it for hours. But it feels like you've never seen it before, and just, we're stumbling through things. And then we also can't do any work on that spot that we want to work on one bar later, or one bar into the phrase, or one beat into the phrase. We end up not being able to do the work that's necessary because we can't start our practice in the right place. So as you're working any piece of music, we should be able to start any bar. The Bach example, there are other ways that we could divide this up, right? I gave us chunks that are 3 bars apart. But there are more chunks that I could practice starting with. Right at the beginning, let me put these in, let me highlight this in a different color. Right at the beginning, we have a theme. Da-da-dum-dum-dum. That's our motif. And it's in the alto line. A bar later, we get the same motif. Da-da-dum-dum-dum. So this would be another point to start with. And then a bar later in the bass. Ba-da-dum-dum-dum. Those are all of the introductions of that motif. Really, if I really wanted to work on this, I should be able to start bar 1. I should be able to start where the soprano line enters. I should be able to start where the bass enters in bar 3. 1, 2. All of those, right? And if we know the piece well, we can. And then we have choices. If we want to work on a particular thing, we can jump right to that spot. And we're not relegated to having to go back to the beginning or back 4 bars or 8 bars or 12 bars. So there's another reason to use more interleaved practice even earlier. You still have to know the piece fairly well, right? We have to be able to pick it up, and you have to know the notes. We can't be sight reading it. But we do want to build all those spots because they're going to unlock when we need to practice. We can jump right to what we need to work on. We don't have to put any fluff in at the beginning, right? And when you're in your lesson, you can start actually where your teacher asks you. And then, now, if you do that and you're doing this all along the whole process, now we have all of these places that we have already pre-built to do our interleaved practice when we're preparing for a performance or something like that. And now we've got all those spots, and we can say, now I'm taking the score away, baby. I don't get to look at it and say, I got to start here and here and here. I have to know them, and I have to know them by memory. It doesn't matter if they're numbered or not numbered, or if you know them by the theme that happens. They can be defined with words, or they can just be known musically by us. And then we can start and we can jump all over the place. Yeah. Because that jumping is what tells us when we're memorized. It's what tells us, do we really know what we're doing? Or if we can't do it at that point, the likelihood of us having a memory slip, being distracted by the audience, and not being able to recover, those go way up. Thanks for being here, Bethany. On that note, we're going to call it a day. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. And this was a fun stream and lots of really, really great questions about a whole variety of stuff. Sight reading, Clair to Lune, Bedlington Groomer, thank you. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. The next stream is in 2 weeks. It'll be on Wednesday again. And if you missed a little bit of today because of the time change, they are happening. Is it, for everybody that was here, is it an hour? It started an hour earlier for you if you didn't change time, I take it, yeah? So be on the lookout for that. And if you do like tuning in, the day before one of these streams, so in 13 days, there will be a placeholder for the stream. There'll be a link. No, it'll be up on the channel. And you can always go click on that, and it'll tell you in your local time zone what time the stream starts. So that would be the best, because I know that you're tuning in from all over the place. That's so cool. And I appreciate all of you being here. Thanks, Nathaniel. Thanks, Seth. Rob, I'm glad you're still here. You were here all the way from the beginning. And David, Nancy, Bethany, Dith, welcome. And sorry that you caught only the end. But yeah, to everybody that was here, thanks for tuning in. Always remember you can send in a video of your playing, and the directions for that are in the description down below. And yeah, have a great rest of your week, and I will see you all at the end of March. All right, take care. Practice hard and smart, but most importantly, get to practicing. All right, everybody.